Please welcome Robin Youngblood. First of all, we're so happy you're okay, and obviously, that was such a traumatic experience, and I'm so sorry. We have a photo of your house, Robin, and when you look at it, I mean, it must be just impossible to believe this was your home.
It was literally matchsticks when we stopped moving.
I think for most of us here, people watching at home, I cannot imagine sort of the sensation of really being buried alive. Can you describe that for us?
My biggest fear has always been drowning. I almost did when I was 9. I drowned. Okay.
How long were you submerged?
I don't know, maybe only 30 seconds, but I was full of mud. I couldn't breathe. So all I could think when we stopped is, I have to get out of here.
How do you think you and Yeti were able to survive when so many others perished?
All I can do is say that I believe in a creator who loves us. And for whatever reason, I think that I was spared. I think part of that is because I have a message to give about these things that are happening, and that we're living out of balance and harmony with Mother Earth. And she's trying to tell us that we have to live in a different way. She's in pain. I felt her pain when that mud was carrying us.
And how do we live in better balance?
Maybe we get out of greed and profiteering. Maybe we decide that there are sustainable ways to live. I teach sustainability. I'm Native American. I've been taught a lot of things by a lot of elders. One of the very first things I was taught is that there are only 2 things in life, love and fear. And it's our choice which way we're going to live. I lived through my greatest fear, okay? So now it's time to live sustainably.
I know that one of the reasons you and Yeti were able to get out of there is the roof of your home was blown off.
Yes, it was.
And if it hadn't been, you worry that it might have come crashing down, and when you surfaced, there would be nowhere to go.
It would have been worse than that. My daughter, son-in-law, and my 7-year-old grandson lived in the first half of the house that was hit. That half was compacted. If they'd been home at that moment, they left 15 minutes before. If they'd been home, they would have been dead.
Thank goodness they were out.
Yes.
And not even in the immediate area.
Yes.
How were you finally rescued? You and Yeti were together.
In the mud about 300 feet beyond our place, there was a little bit of high ground, and the mud sort of went in a Y around one house. That lady and her 3 kids were home. The kids came running. I told them not to get in the mud because I could see it'd kill them, it'd drown them. And to go get their mom and have her call 911 and call for a helicopter.
How long did you have to wait for that helicopter to arrive?
I think about an hour.
That must have seemed like days.
We were drenched, we were covered in mud, we were freezing. I found a couple of old coats sitting behind me on that washing machine and threw one to Yeti and covered myself in one. Yeah, it was a very long wait.
I know that you owe a real debt of gratitude to the man who rescued you, and Fire Commissioner and Rescue Helicopter Volunteer Randy Fay is actually joining us via Skype today. Hi, Randy, how are you?
Good morning.
When you first heard the call that a mudslide had occurred in Oso, did you have any conception how bad it was going to be?
No, mudslides are pretty common in Washington on a small scale. It was, that shock was building as we were flying in there because we were listening to the deputies and the state patrol talking on the radios, and one of them mentioned that there was no downstream flow in the river any longer. So we knew that something catastrophic had happened, but we weren't prepared when we flew over the ridge to see that neighborhood completely gone, and where we had been used to seeing 40-ish homes, now there was about 7 piles of debris and a moonscape to deal with at that point.
And boy, you must have been so happy, Robin, to see Randy when he came. And how was he able to get you on the helicopter? Where was he able to land so you guys could fly to safety?
I think he landed on a piece of roof to get Yeti. And then he came over to where I was. He came down on a line, yeah, and came over to where I was and found a door to help me stand on to get me in the harness. And by the way, I'm going to be thankful to see Randy anytime for the rest of my life.
I bet, I bet. Randy, I mean, you know, just hearing that, obviously it was a pretty perilous rescue effort. And so thank you for everything that you have done in the days and weeks following this disaster. But how is the community as a whole faring?
I think as well as could be expected. I know you've been involved interview-wise in a lot of these things that go on, and you've probably seen that rural communities tend to have a resilience and a community commitment that you don't always find in some of the urbanized areas. And along the Cascade foothills and mountains, all those communities we work closely with all year long for doing our mountain rescue operations, and we work with those fire departments and people in those communities. So it's been very reassuring to see all of the Cascade foothill communities rallying, donating, working the debris pile, and there's good resiliency there. So it's a tragedy, and it's going to take a long time to heal, and those memories are going to be there for a long time. But I think they've got a lot going for them in terms of bonding together as a community and starting that healing process.
Well, again, thank you for everything you've done, and thank you for speaking with us today, Randy. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
And Robin, you know, I asked about how the community is doing. You probably knew many of the people who died or who are still missing, and that must be heartbreaking for you.
My 4 closest neighbors are buried under 60 feet of mud. And the odds that they'll ever find them are very small. They had 2 young daughters, and I've been in connection with them.
The daughters?
Yes. Our communities are very strong. Arlington is a town of maybe, I don't know, 10,000 people. Darrington's 1,500 people. And all of them turned out, and they cooked food for the rescue workers. They probably still are. And they took donations, and they're doing everything possible to help us.
Arthur Lerner Lamb is the Deputy Director of the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory at Columbia University. And Art, how does something like this happen? I think it's hard for people to understand sort of the geology of this event.
Well, one of the things that those of us who study the Earth say is that geology is inevitable. What we mean is that the Earth is a living planet. It responds to geological forces, and on human timescales, these events actually are quite common. In this particular case, what had happened is that there had been torrential rain just before, and that rain softened the soil, made it weaker. And because that slope above the town of Oso is very steep, eventually the soil couldn't hold together. So it just collapsed in this very catastrophic event.
I know there was a report released in 1999 commissioned by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and it said that the area where the mudslide occurred would one day have a catastrophic failure. So I guess the question is, should the county or should officials have allowed homes to be built in this very sort of dangerous area?
Well, that is in fact precisely the question, whether they should have allowed that. But the deeper issue is when we learn something about a place, when we learn something about the potential for a natural hazard, how do we communicate that information effectively to the people that must regulate or the people that must provide incentives for that, for the appropriate action. So it really is a question that you must pose to society. How do we use the best information available?
And in fact, we posed that question to county officials, and we received this statement, which reads in part, "We want to understand how a mudslide of this magnitude could happen in our county. We have many questions that need to be answered, and we are committed to finding those answers. Right now, we are focused on searching for victims and helping families and community members affected by the slide." Having said that, Robin, were you aware that this area could potentially be so dangerous and a mudslide of this magnitude could occur there?
Absolutely not. I would never bring my 7-year-old grandson to a place that he might be killed.
I also know that you were able to salvage one thing from your home, and you brought it with you today. Can you show us what that is?
Yes, and this is another thing that I thank Randy Fay for. This floated up between us, between Yeti and I, when we were waiting to be rescued. And the picture is called Wolf Vision. In my tradition, I'm very close to Wolf. He's a night warrior, which means that he's one who can see through the darkness. And when he floated up between us, I knew that we were going to be all right and that we'd been spared for some kind of reason. And when Randy came to get us, I was holding on to the picture, and I couldn't take it up in the harness with me, but I asked him if he would bring it up when he came, and he did.
Well, we're so glad at least you have something from your home, Robin Youngblood, and most importantly, you have yourself, your friend Yeti, and of course, your wonderful family. So thank you so much for being here and sharing this experience with us. We really appreciate it.